So there's no doubt that this 60 FPS conversation is at the center of gaming today. Since the new console generation showed up, this has been at the forefront for many console players actually judging a lot of video games. At Plague Tale recently, its developers moved their FPS performance from about 40, which was the max with 120 hertz monitor, to 1080 60 FPS just recently. Digital Foundry did a review, and I encourage everybody to watch it. Somebody told me I was selecting quotes today from it, but they didn't know that I watched the whole video. And basically, they talked about the caveats. They had to reduce resolution, they had to reduce the RAT performance from 60 to 30 FPS, and also had to reduce foliage detail to be able to get the game to push its performance. Also, a lot of folks are saying, this is actually a good sign, but I say that this might not necessarily be the good sign a lot of people are thinking about it or thinking it's going to be. Why? Because even though these simple tweaks are representative of them coming together to make the game run at a smooth frame rate, the caveats of reducing things like NPC detail, foliage detail, environmental detail reduce the, in my opinion, ambition in other applications for developers to want to make much more, ambitious games if they have to sit down and tread on water and think that the consoles, which I think are the lowest tier form of gaming PC, almost representative of this time. And when I say representative of this time, I mean, if you're talking about a powerful machine of today, you're probably not going to be looking at the low tier at what the consoles can offer. Why? Because these consoles were, in the time they were released, comparable to devices from somewhere back in 2015, 2016. Gamers Nexus did a video on this. I recommend that you watch it. When they were looking for devices to compare the PS5 with, they had to go back as far as the 1060 in some cases, which is very old in terms of raster power. Now, ray tracing, yes, you're going to see those differences, but there's almost nothing that these new consoles are bringing that are groundbreaking. They've been left behind even when you think about 2019's best machines. And I know someone's going to bring up the 2070, 2080 Ti, but you're talking about the graphics card. We haven't even compared the CPUs that were available at that time that even your consoles or our consoles don't even carry. Thinking about this, though, I want to go ahead and kind of make something, I'll put something as a caveat. Game development has not really changed from when people have been making games for a long time. If I want to be safe in making my assumptions, I will say from the PS3 and Xbox 360 days, video games are generally made almost very similarly. Now, yes, there have been additional tools added that have made the development process very much streamlined, like say things like Megascans, which is a very huge resource. In fact, Megascans is used in making some really huge games, including Street Fighter. You've seen it in some other titles. Look at the opening of your games. Whenever your games are about to fire up, look at the page where they have all these different icons. They'll show you. Megascans was also used in making a Plague Tale. It's a photorealistic library of all kinds of different landforms. These guys go around taking pictures of rocks and all that, and then you can bring it straight into your game and make your game look like it's almost picturesque real. So they're just assets. But the file types are basically the same so that they can be imported into your engine for the most part. So this is pretty much how it's been done. In fact, some people are saying things like, man, I hope they use the new engine. I hope they use the new engine. But many of those folk don't necessarily pay attention to, how games and developers sometimes will use old engines and still be able to achieve some really cool visual fidelity. Because the whole visual fidelity and all that talk is just about file types based on how you can pretty much convert a specific look and put into your game engine that you already use, because they support things like FBX. FBX are, these are files that are used in assets and, like animations and 3D models. So this is Street Fighter V playing on the screen, developed in Unreal Engine 4. What's crazy is, Capcom was really, really excited about using UE4 to make this game. I think there was an announcement that I just saw that said something about Capcom being, really excited to, make, to make a Street Fighter 5, sorry. I say Street Fighter 4, I meant Street Fighter 5 in Unreal Engine 4. But just recently, I think what people haven't realized is Capcom has decided that in making Street Fighter V, which arguably from an artistic perspective looks better than Street Fighter V, this is Street Fighter 6, by the way, is being made with Capcom's older engine called RE Engine from 2014. So they decided that they were going to go back a little bit to basically make a game that they already were making. They didn't go with UE5, which, you know, in my opinion, I don't know why they decided not to. But I've been playing the demo. I've played the, you know, open beta. I played the second closed beta. And I can tell you that the game is solid. It's a phenomenal game, art-wise, you know, looks, effects, character models, all this stuff. That's because the art of making video games have basically been the same. The language, the programming language that they write a lot of these complex, intricate video games have been the same for a long time. They've been using C++ to do the job. They've been using languages like C# to do the job. In fact, here's the article where, you know, Epic Games published that they were going to be joining forces with Capcom to pretty much develop or, you know, release Street Fighter V with Unreal Engine 4. So here it says, you know, this article, it's on the Unreal Engine website, and it says Unreal Engine 4 to power next generation of Capcom's premier fighting game franchise, which has been a very successful franchise for Capcom. Announced exclusively for the PS4, Computer Entertainment System, and PC, and providing cross-platform play that will unite fans into a centralized player base. So pretty much this is something that you can take to account, and then seeing them go back to the RE engine, which is an engine that was created in 2014, by the way. So around the time that they were actually trying to make Unreal, you know, use the Unreal Engine 4 to do Street Fighter V, they had an engine that they were already creating in the background, which was used to make Resident Evil 7 and so on and so forth. And this is the engine now that they're using to make their Street Fighter V game. So how does game development work? How is it made? So there are many ways, and different studios will do their thing differently. Ideally, as they start to conceptualize their idea, they start from the art phase. They get their concept artists to start drawing, you know, a lot of art models and, you know, kind of creating the vision for the game. Watch a documentary. I watch this stuff, you know, from the documentaries like, you know, the God of War documentary, the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order making of the game, making of that, you know, documentary, and so on and so forth. And I can tell you that at the end of the day, when you think about, you know, how they go around and get this stuff done, you will realize that the process is mainly, in my opinion, similar in a general sense, but then the specificities, are based on how the games are made. So a fighting game would do things differently because it has to create its rules, and it has to create its mechanics, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, two engines can be used to make games that look, you know, arguably very different from one another. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, just the game's, you know, designers' choices that will make the game look a certain way compared to another game. I mean, if we were to tell you that a game like this, and then, you know, was made in Unreal Engine 4, as well as a game like this, you'd probably say to yourself, that just seems disjointed. How is it possible that two games made in the same engine, one of them has a very vibrant artistic art style, the other one has a much more dark artistic art style? It's just all the choices in terms of art. So they're all doing basically the same thing. One just chooses, we want our game to look like this, and then the other one chooses that we want our game to look like this. So at the end of the day, this is one side of the conversation. And then when you move to performance and when you move to all that, then you have to talk about ambition. Fighting games don't really have to deal too much, in my opinion, with those ambitious aspects. You can run fighting games on very, very, you know, low spec machines. Yes, you'd have to remove a lot of things like the background detail and so on and so forth, and kind of make them look, you know, what we call distance meshes. If you look very closely at this stage where Sakura is playing against this particular, who's this that's eating a beating here? Cage or Kage or so was the one that was there. Let me show you what a distance mesh is. You see these mountains in the background here, right? You see these waterfalls and all this stuff. Those things are juxtaposed, you know, on one another in a 3D space. This is a 3D space. Yes, it's a 2D game, but it's a 3D space. Trust me, it's a 3D space. So they put these distance meshes and the clouds and all that. They, you know, colorize them, or, you know, they shade them to match the theme, and they just look like, you know, you're fighting like in some ravine in this place. It's all artistic, you know, implementation overall. And so when it comes to performance and all that, when your game decides that it's going to actually maybe take on a different aspect and push things to a higher boundary where you're dropping visual effects, you're doing all kinds of stuff, then, you know, for gamers to say, well, we need to make sure that these consoles that I argue are not really that strong need to be the ones that basically we base these games on. we're not going to be able to get anything more than what it is that we already have. We're going to continue to hold ourselves back. And you see, what's funny is even those who have the new generation of consoles, they'll make this same argument. They'll make the exact same argument, especially when it comes down to, say, a game like, say, Hogwarts Legacy on the PlayStation 4. I remember seeing a lot of people saying we need to move on from making games for the PlayStation 4 because it's holding the new console generation back. Right? They make the same argument because, they're saying, oh, those machines are weaker. Those who are looking at the newer machines and saying, man, we need to kind of start looking at, say, okay, maybe whatever these consoles are able to run the games on, maybe that's what we should do in terms of making the games. And we need to move on and advance development of games and make graphics more realistic. And do you see that argument can also be made against that position? I'm not saying that that's the argument. I'm just saying that if they're making a game, they need to push for the best visual quality as possible if they possibly can, and then go from there in order for them to be able to go ahead and say, okay, whatever the consoles are able to basically manage, and if there's a refresh that can actually perform, more in terms of, say, the console power, then we need to go for that. And we're going to be getting something very soon. We're going to be getting the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is going to be interesting to see how all that works, because that's going to be a console that actually, in my opinion anyways, is going to be able to do better than the PS5. And if Microsoft is going to do a console refresh, which I don't know if they're going to do, they might, then we're also going to see a little bit more power with these machines, just as they did with the PlayStation 4 to PS4 Pro. So these are my thoughts so far about, the artistic side of making games. I know people say things like, oh, we've come a long way. We've come a long way in hardware, but in terms of making the video games, we've been using C++ forever. I mean, C++ is almost an ancient, technological scripting language, but it's at the core of many, many of the great games that you see out here. C# as well. Also very cool in terms of it. So, I would recommend that everybody, the moment people understand this and break out of this whole, conversation, then they'll realize that, okay, if I'm signing up for getting a console, I'm signing up to get a machine that is a closed loop, a closed ecosystem, and is going to at some point get weak. It's not going to be as powerful anymore, if you get what I mean. And then if they're going for a gaming PC, they understand that I have the flexibility and I'm able to go ahead and do pretty much what it is that I feel like doing overall. But anyways, these are my thoughts. I'll get out of your hair. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.